Hello again, cuties. My name is Elena. If you're new here, please click the subscribe button. If not, thank you for accompanying me on this hopeful journey already. Today's topic will be to rethink how we got to the point of consuming we have today. We'll ponder the importance of some human creations and some objects that helped us throughout the journey. And where is the biggest breakpoint for me? As always, never follow someone as a guru. Always recheck, rethink, and recapacitate on what I'm talking about. Do your own research, okay? Because curiosity is the best weapon we have, cuties. As usual, turn the Spanish or Catalan subtitles, if you will. With that said, let me lead you into a little bit of human history. Grab a cup of tea and let's recap into understanding today's model of consumerism. But also, at the end of the video, I will show you some new innovations that we have made during the last years that have been trying to make better what we have wronged in the world. Some hopeful inventions, of course. So let's follow on. As we know, some of the reasons why humanity has thrived so far is by our ability to create and mold our surroundings. From ancient times, prehistoric times, yes, we're going that far. The usage and understanding of our surroundings has been key in humanity development. That led us to create some great things and some horrible things. The first tools that we used to make were, of course, for survival, to help us defend ourselves from predators and from other hominids, and eventually to work on the land. With that working on the land, we've also been able to create more stable environments, domesticating animals and discovering materials like copper that would help us to build better weapons, better tools, some stable homes to live in, and that would let humanity do the next step. With the understanding of physics and certain materials, we have been able to create things, for example, like the wheel, that will help our interaction with the world. For example, the first wheel was made of wood, and throughout the ages, an understanding of physics and how the materials work, we've been able to make it better, upgrade it, like the ones that we know in Roman empires, in medieval ages, and further on to the wheel that we know nowadays, with very different techniques of production and very different materials. Of course, the wheel is just an example. We have made several and very important discoveries and very important tools that in the end will lead us to the place that we know nowadays, the consumerism that we know nowadays. Fast forward past the medieval ages, which were not as dark as we may think. We had great thinkers and we have great inventions. But yes, the feudal system was not the best. Religion was having too much of a grip on population. But we're not here to talk about the medieval ages, are we? Following on, we will get to Baroque and Rococo. Since I studied several years of art history, I will position myself with the art movements because I always thought that art movements are related to society, of course, and a response of it. So in those ages, we began to put the basis of capitalism because generally the 7th century was kind of a depression age where people struggle because of the late colonization of America, the horrible colonization of America, the plague, and some other wars between Catholics and Protestants. This I'm talking about Europe, of course. At this time, most of all of the products that were made and consumed were made by artisans, were made by families or guilds that actually had like a specialty on wood, on blacksmith, on ceramics, on a different variety of things. And if that may seem like an irrelevant topic, it is not, because this is one of the things that we have lost a little bit throughout the ages. Of course, there's plenty of artisans nowadays, not as much as it used to be. But not all things are bad. As always, humanity continued to strive and to create newer tools, newer technologies that were super important for our society nowadays. A few examples of that would be William Harvey and its confirmation of the blood flow, the famous Galileo Galilei with the perfection of the telescope and the confirmation and completion of the heliocentric theory started by Copernicus and Kepler. Newton pulled out the universal gravitational theory, one of the bases of the physics nowadays. The experimental or scientific method was also settled by Francis Bacon. Of course, we can't forget about Descartes and his famous phrase, "I think, therefore I exist," which led to rationalism that would be really important to understand how the next generations would think about technology, about science. Following all this, it came the discovery of new energy sources that will later on help us to create the mess or the start of the mess that we are today. That was the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, and that's the topic for today. So we're there. The Industrial Revolution didn't start at one specific point, at one specific age. It was a conjunction of new technologies, new inventions, and social changes that were going on onto a certain period of time. These new technologies led us to mold society into the things we know today, or at least start to. In 1775, Watt designed the first successful steam engine, and further on, coal engines led us to create bigger machines like the locomotive engine in 1801. By that time, we already implemented sewing machines, agriculture machines, and some other new structures, new buildings that led people to think that they were starting to be replaced for these machines. Does this ring a bell in you? And ended up in some riots in 1811, more or less. Following all this, the 1800s were a really difficult nuts era where we started developing new technologies that led humanity into a fast-paced civilization. In 1821, Faraday discovered and confirmed the electromagnetic rotation. With that, the first little motor was made. And further on, in 1831, he created the first electric engine with the discovering of the electromagnetic current that led us to create newer engines. This eventually led us to have the invention of the light bulb, which meant that we extended the period of time that humans can work, socialize, and interact with each other. And that's perfect for exploitation, if you ask me. In fact, we were speaking about the wheel before, and maybe you don't know, but the first tire, the first pneumatic tire was made in this era, in 1846. Aside, Monod discovered reinforced concrete, and that led us to create bigger buildings, more resistant weapons, and that led us, of course, to Mossholder and a different way of seeing the world around us. This would play a bigger role further ahead on the two world wars. At tech and science, humanity was born. Futurism, for example, and other vanguard art movements reflected this in such a variety of ways, some embracing the future and some really reluctant on it. I'm just overwhelmed by how society was starting to be. So let's stop for a bit and take a look at society, because society was always changing quite a lot throughout this era, and with it, how we interacted with a lot of things. Wealth was also redistributed, and some new social ladders were made. Bourgeoisie, for example, the richer class, and the lower class, the working class. This separated society into bigger groups, the ones that had the wealth and had the production, and the ones that were making it. This must sound familiar, right? Women and children began to have a big role on the society of these days, because they started to work on these factories, and at that point, society began to exploit that lower class that survived in harsh environments, polluted environments throughout their whole lives. This lower stratum of the society didn't have much change but to take all these cheaper available options that were being created of several products that maybe were not the best for them. But of course, the upper class didn't have much problem with it because they still could afford the artisans and they still could afford the good quality materials. Now, let's continue, because I want to speak about a certain material that we all know too well. One of our biggest inventions and one of the main problems nowadays, polymers or synthetic plastic. The first one was made in 1907. It was bakelite, was made by Leo Henrik Beckland. We have several objects that were made with that material from those days. Bakelite was the first synthetic, hot moldable, and rough hard plastic that we made fully synthetic. So that meant that we could create materials instead of relying only on the natural sources. That was quite a revolution, but maybe we got too excited with it. Now, in the next century, please bear with me, we're almost there. We also continued this path of innovation, of new technologies, and between the two world wars, the economy was also reshaped into something new. It was not only about the land, it was not only about the resources, but the main economies in the world began to compete into technological advances. Such greed, of course, also led us to create one of our worst nightmares ever made, the nuclear bomb. Nuclear welfare and new type of guns, because of course, we just love to fight for some rich's interests. We did have a lot of medical improvements like penicillin, but this is not our main theme. So, amazing physics advances that help us to comprehend the universe, and therefore discovering and ensuring the existence of certain particles that led us to what I said before, the nuclear bomb, but also to a new kind of understanding of the world around us and how we can interact and shape it. At the same time, a spatial competition was born, and all the tech that came with it, the first Apollo missions and the one that brought us to the moon. Also in 1985, we first discovered one of the big problems that you may all know, the ozone layer hole. Some part of society began to think that we can do better and began to actually go against all of these improvements that we were making in certain areas that we were starting to see that they bear really big problems for us. We just became richer and we became more screwed up. Even though I have to say, the ozone layer hole is not our biggest problem at all right now. In fact, it had restored pretty much thanks to our efforts in lowering the consumption of fossil fuels, even though we are not even in the point that we should be. Society then began to consume at a fast pace that was no longer sustainable. The waste that we produced were far bigger than the things that we consumed. Fast fashion, consumerism, and marketing strategies only worried about the quantity sold, not the quality of the products that were sold. We can see some examples on some toys that were made with uranium and things that were deadly, or other stuff that was pretty toxic to us. And in the 15th year, we thought that was okay. We all know all that kind of stories, right? Also, these objects and the consume of it began to be kind of a social ladder to upgrade your place in society, because having more objects, having the newest trending object was the deal. It was the fanciest thing to do. So that's how we began this desensitized way of consuming that we have nowadays. So, After this fast-paced review of everything we have ever done, we can say that we are in big trouble, yeah. But also, people like you, like me, and other people are making improvements and are making little changes to make all this better. We also came up with ways of recycling, upcycling, and a lot of things that science brought us to make all of these things quite better if we gave them the power to. You might have seen different news talking about microplastics and how they can affect us, because we don't know the true full extent that those can affect us, and they are everywhere, in you, in me, in my dog. And that's really a problem that we brought upon us and may have a solution, but a lot of species have been affected by it. As I said, even ourselves. What we can know is that our government doesn't really care, as long as the economy strives on. We can also talk about the air quality, especially in big cities, that is actually kind of nuts, because a lot of cancers are produced by that. So we have different problems that all resume, for me, in my opinion, from the same place: over-consumerism. Because this over-consumerism just confirms to these companies that they can be producing that way without any consequences and getting rich and rich and richer. That means this 90%, as I was saying before in the Industrial Revolution, have to adapt to all these cheaper, bad products that we make, or maybe just because we conceived certain products to be one use only, or use and throw away products, because some are, of course, some medical stuff have to be one use for all we know about diseases and everything. But I don't know about a lot of certain things that we use every day, like plastic wrapping in supermarkets. Is that really necessary? Well, now that we got a little perspective on how we get to the consume nowadays, we can begin to think about new ways of improving all these kind of things that we didn't know that were bad in the first place. As always, not everything is bad, and bad things and bad technologies. Humanity has this thing of perseverance, of stubbornness, that led us to create the most amazing things as well. And for some of us, the newer generations, we don't really believe in the way of consumerism nowadays, even though most of us are participating on it. A lot of us are starting to see that this is not the way to live, and this is not the way that we want to proceed. But it's hard to keep the motivation up when everything around you is crumbling down, right? Well, let me show you some examples of good things that we've made lately. First of all, air carbon. This material was created by New Litae, and it's taking advantage of a natural process that some plants and some organisms have of taking the CO2 emissions and making them into a kind of moldable plastic that we can use for several stuff that we're using nowadays, having similar properties to some of them. This will also help us bring all this contaminated air into a product that we can use and maybe kind of help of solving the polymer and fossil usage. Hydrogen planes in the second place. Hydrogen is a high potential technology with a specific energy per unit mass that is 3 times higher than some fuels that we are using nowadays. That would mean that if we generate renewable energy through electrolysis, hydrogen emits no CO2 emissions, which would let us create engines for bigger machines like planes or other stuffs that emit 0 contaminant agents. Even Boeing has said that maybe they will have the first hydrogen plane in 2035. Some time ago, we also wanted to start putting an end to the sea contamination, because microplastics are killing a big amount of the sea life in our oceans. For some time, some scientists have been investigating certain bacteria and certain organisms that eat the plastic itself. Firstly, they tried with E. coli, but that bacteria prefers more sugary treats. So they change the idea and they come up with Ideonella sacaiensis. I hope I said that well. Ideonella sacaiensis therefore prefers not that sugary treats, but a kind of material that we see a lot nowadays, PET. PET is a type of plastic that we use in bottles and some packaging nowadays that is causing a lot of trouble in certain environments. So this could help us to eat that plastic and maybe solve a little bit of the ocean problem. And as you might know, nowadays we have different kinds of energies, renewable energies that we can use. So the fossil fuel problem and the contamination, the air pollution problem can be solved with some of these technologies, like the solar, the aeolic, the hydrogen things, the hybrid cars, maybe electrical ones that emit at least no CO2 contamination. We also have the two main things that I think are the best options, even if you may think that they are not: nuclear fission and nuclear fusion, because fission and fusion are not the same. Fission is what we have nowadays, and even if you think that it's a wasteful technology, actually it's one of the best options that we have nowadays. The energy level that produces versus the waste that it produces and how we take care of it is actually really controlled. If we get to a new kind of energy with nuclear fusion, that would be great. We would have an almost unending supply of energy with almost no waste. So yeah, we'll talk about nuclear energy in general in another video, don't worry about that. So with more technologies that will help us to get to a better and kinder environment, not only for us, for the world around us, and to help stop this destruction that we come up these last centuries, I think there's a hopeful future that we can look up to. So let me tell you my thoughts about it. After all of this yap fest, and thank you for accompanying me on this one. So this section is just my thoughts and reflections on what I yapped about all this time. For me, technology and science are something so positive and so encouraging that we can use for better things than worse things. But I think one of the main problems nowadays is, one, not understanding how these technologies work and the misinformation around them of several media and several interests, political interests sometimes, that are in between. Don't let us utilize all these kind of things in the good ways that they are meant and thought to be used for. And yeah, maybe this is what led us to this dark kind of era of climate change. Well, we worsened the climate change. It was already going to happen, but we made it so much worse because we made the conditions being conditioned by the way that we are consuming, producing, and treating the waste around all of this production. And actually, I think that we have a problem on not focusing on the good things that are happening nowadays. Everything is fueled with rage, with misinformation, and with bad news that only get to stress us more and understand way worse the world around us. I think we should give attention to the things that are trying to improve all of these bad things that we didn't know in the end that they were going to happen. There wasn't enough investigation, and science was growing into such a big scale that it was impossible to control everything at once. But well, if a mistake is made, there's always a solution for it, if we want to, of course. This is one of the motives I actually opened this channel for, because I want to shine a little light on all of these technologies, all of these processes and newer that is bringing us to a brighter future. But only if we stop letting the bad things overwhelm the good things that we are creating, and we should stop giving some companies, some products, the importance that they have right now, for the companies to be able to realize that they can do things different and we can change the world with it. I truly believe so. And I know for some of us it's difficult to think that we can change the world or to think that only the companies are to blame. But in my opinion, taking that kind of accountability is good for us because we can understand and begin to consume in a different way. And we can play the capitalism game and still win on what we want. Not in terms of economy, not in terms of getting richer ourselves, but providing the better future for the regeneration to come and for ourselves. Because, geez, I'm young and I don't want to die because of contamination and the destruction of the world. And I think you won't too. To end up, my message for this video would be that technology is good. Science is pretty good, guys. And it's what's going to lead us into a better place. And that's what's going to lead us to solve these problems. The same thing that got us into it will be the same thing that takes us out of it. If, as I said before, we give the importance to the things that they deserve the importance. A tool is a tool, and it needs someone to operate it. So even with AI, this is just a newer tool, and we're kind of living a second industrial revolution, and we may think that this is going to take away work, that this is going to be a mess, that this is going to destroy us. The same way that the industrial revolution caused that insecurity on people. But I don't think that's quite the truth. The words will simply change and we will evolve. And if we give power to the right companies, if we give power to the right places, if we give money, because world nowadays works with money, we give money and we give our attention to the good companies, I think that everything will get better eventually. Of course, thank you for viewing this video and I hope you learned something throughout it. And for the next videos, I will start to talk about materials or certain production systems, because I think it's important to understand where we come from and where we are headed to. I want to thank you as well for all of you in the last video and the newer subscriptions. I'm gonna put a little challenge for you. Think about the most useless thing that you have in your house, the most brittle, stupid thing that you can think of. As always, please be respectful in my comments, leave a like, and subscribe to this channel if you're interested in this kind of topics, because I will be uploading once a week. Always be kind to yourself and others around you. Bye, cuties!